too much noise today. I just need the road, the rain, and the hum of the engine.
You know, there's this quiet kind of heartbreak that sneaks up on you when your kids grow up. No one really talks about it. It's not the dramatic kind of pain, not like a breakup or a loss. It's more like a slow ache, the kind that lives in the background of your days. And if you're anything like me, you didn't even notice it at first. You just kept moving forward, doing what you've always done, showing up, being there. But one day, it hits you. The shift, the distance. You realize they don't look at you the same way. They don't listen like they used to. You've become optional, or at least that's how it feels. I remember standing in the kitchen one evening, just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and a few dirty dishes in the sink. I had just gotten off the phone with my son. A short call. He was polite, a little distracted, and said he'd try to call again next week, and when I hung up, I just stood there. Empty. Not because he was rude, not because he said anything wrong, but because I felt like I didn't matter to him anymore. Not the way I used to. And then came the questions, the ones I didn't want to ask out loud. Did I do something wrong? Was I too much? Not enough? Did all those years of sacrifice mean nothing now? I gave everything. You probably did too. We gave them our time, our strength, our patience, our dreams. We swallowed our hurt, postponed our joy, kept going even when we were exhausted. And now that we have more time, more space, all we want is connection, a little warmth, a sign that we still matter. But sometimes what we get is silence, or distance, or worse, that invisible wall, the one made of sighs and polite nods. They think they know better. They brush us off, correct us, talk to us like we're fragile or outdated, and it hurts. God, it hurts. But here's the thing I'm learning, slowly and painfully. This isn't about them. It's about me, about us. Because if we keep chasing their approval, begging for attention, trying to reclaim a role that life has already transformed, we lose ourselves again. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists," and I think about that a lot. How much of my pain was really about resisting change, resisting the fact that I'm no longer the center of their world, that I don't get to define how they see me anymore. That's a hard truth to swallow. But it's also freeing. Because if I stop trying to control how they respond to me, I get to focus on something deeper, my own sense of value, my own presence, my own wholeness. Lately, I've been trying something different. Instead of asking for their love, I ask myself, do I love myself right now? Do I treat myself with the kind of respect I expect from others? And often the answer is no. Not really. I've been so busy trying to stay relevant in their lives that I've forgotten how to be relevant in my own. So I'm turning inward. Not out of bitterness, not to shut anyone out, but because I need to come home to myself. It's funny, I used to think love was about being needed, about being there all the time, fixing things, offering advice, showing up before they even asked. But now I think love, real love, starts with presence. With being someone who respects their own time, their own heart, their own silence. I don't want to beg for phone calls or guilt trip them into visits. I want them to want to come. I want to be someone they choose to see, not someone they feel obligated to call. And that starts with me becoming someone I want to be around too. So if you've felt that ache, that sting of invisibility, I want you to know you're not alone. I feel it too. I carry it some days like a second skin, but I also believe, deeply, that we're not done. That our worth isn't tied to how often our children text us, or how much they still rely on us. That there is something sacred and powerful in reclaiming our own space. We're still here, we're still whole. And maybe, just maybe, the most important relationship we still get to grow is the one with ourselves. It took me a long time to understand that life isn't one long, continuous chapter. It's a series of seasons. Some of them are filled with fire and movement, others with quiet and stillness. The hardest part? Knowing when to stop clinging to the season that's past and start leaning into the one that's arrived. For so long I measured myself by what I could do for others, especially my kids. I was the caretaker, the planner, the fixer. I knew how to get things done, how to show up, how to be strong. And honestly, I was proud of that. Still am, in many ways, but no one told me that at some point, all that strength and usefulness wouldn't be needed the same way. No one told me what to do when the phone stopped ringing as often, when advice turned into interference, when presence started to feel like pressure. Jung spoke of two halves of life, and the more I sit with that idea, the more it resonates. The first half is loud. It's filled with effort, striving, building, giving. It's where we construct an identity, a name, a role, a place in the world. It's where we raise children, build careers, and create meaning through doing. But there comes a time when all that no longer fits. Not because it wasn't real or worthy, but because something inside starts to ask for something else, something quieter, deeper, truer. No one teaches you how to let go of the scaffolding you spent decades building. There's no manual for how to stop measuring your day by how useful you were to someone else. And there's definitely no easy way to accept that the value you once offered in busyness now needs to be transformed into presence. I remember sitting on my porch one evening, the sun sinking behind the trees, and realizing that I didn't know what I wanted anymore. Not really. My days had always revolved around others, their needs, their schedules, their feelings. And now, with the quiet around me, I had to face a much harder question. What does my soul want? It was disorienting at first. I felt like a satellite that had lost its orbit, but that question, that deep inner call, it wouldn't go away. And slowly I began to see it for what it really was, an invitation, not to fade into the background, not to disappear, but to return to myself. The second half of life isn't about maintaining the momentum of the first. It's about shifting direction completely. It's about taking all the wisdom, the heartache, the learning, and turning it inward. It's a time not for performance, but for presence, not for proving, but for being. And that doesn't mean giving up on love or connection. It means relating differently, relating from a place of wholeness instead of need, from calm instead of control, from listening instead of instructing. So many of us, parents especially, stay stuck in old roles because we fear what happens if we stop playing them. If I'm not the giver, who am I? If I'm not the one holding everything together, what do I become? But what I'm starting to see is that the role doesn't define the soul. And when we let go of the role, the soul finally has space to speak, and it whispers things we forgot we knew. That joy can come in solitude. That stillness is not emptiness, but depth. That purpose isn't something you chase. It's something you allow to surface when you stop running. There's a kind of peace that only comes when you surrender to the second half, when you stop trying to light a candle at noon, to force old ways to work in a new light. Jung spoke of that too. He said that trying to live the same way in the evening of life as you did in the morning only leads to suffering. And he was right. It hurts to hold on to what's already changed. It hurts to fight the flow. But when we let go, when we start to trust that the soul knows the way forward, something extraordinary begins to happen. We stop measuring our worth by how needed we are. We begin to feel something softer, steadier, wiser. We begin to live from within. And that's where real life begins again. One of the hardest things I've had to admit to myself, and I wonder if you've felt it too, is that I spent so many years equating love with self-erasure. Not consciously, of course. It's not like I woke up one day and decided, today, I'll disappear a little more for someone else's sake. But little by little, I gave up pieces of myself. I said yes when I meant no. I stayed quiet when I wanted to scream. I gave and gave and gave, because that's what good parents do, right? But what no one warned me about is what happens when the giving never stops, when the love you offer doesn't have boundaries, when being available turns into being invisible. I used to think I was doing the noble thing, being endlessly present, always ready, never asking too much. I thought that would keep the connection alive. I thought that would guarantee love. But over time, it started to have the opposite effect. My kids didn't seem closer. In fact, they seemed further away. They stopped asking for my thoughts. They didn't really see me. Not because they stopped loving me, but because I had blurred the lines of who I even was. I had leaned so far in, I lost my shape. And when you lose your shape, people don't know how to hold you anymore. Carl Jung warned us about this. The danger of one-sidedness. When we live only in one aspect of ourselves, especially the role of the self-sacrificing caregiver, we suppress everything else. And what we suppress doesn't go away. It becomes shadow, it waits, it grows bitter. It starts to whisper things like, they don't care about you, you're just a burden now, you don't matter anymore. And it hurts, because part of it feels true. But here's the more difficult truth. I taught them not to see me. I taught them over and over that I had no limits, that I would always be there, always be okay, always accept whatever crumbs of connection were left. I did it with love, but it was still a lesson I didn't mean to teach. The thing is, love without self-respect isn't sustainable. It might look noble on the outside, but inside, it corrodes. It erodes the soul, and I don't want to live like that anymore. So I'm learning to reclaim my shape. It's strange. At first, saying no after years of saying yes. Speaking up instead of swallowing feelings. Choosing not to jump in every time someone hints at needing something. It feels selfish, even scary, but it's also powerful, because when I respect myself, I begin to teach others to do the same. When I take up space again, my presence becomes real again. Not desperate, not demanding, just quietly solid, and strangely, beautifully. The distance begins to close, not because I begged for it, but because people gravitate toward clarity, toward energy that's grounded and calm. Jung believed that we don't earn respect by demanding it. We embody it. We grow into it. And the older I get, the more I see how true that is. It's not about withdrawing love or punishing silence. It's about shifting posture, moving from I'll do anything to stay close to you to I'll stay close to myself, and if you want to meet me there, I'll welcome you. That's presence. That's maturity. That's the kind of love that doesn't fade with time, because it has roots. So if you've been feeling like you've vanished in the name of love, you're not alone. But you don't have to stay gone. You don't have to keep erasing yourself. Your presence matters. Your truth matters. And maybe it's time to let the people in your life re-meet you, not as the endless giver, but as the whole person you've always been underneath. There's this strange moment in life. Maybe you felt it when the noise dies down. The kids are grown. The house is quieter. The phone doesn't buzz as often. You look around, and for the first time in what feels like forever, there's space. Not the kind of space that feels liberating at first. No, it's the kind that feels hollow, empty, a little frightening. I remember walking into my living room one afternoon and just standing there, not knowing what to do next. No errands to run, no appointments to keep, no little voices calling my name, just me, alone with the stillness. And a strange, aching question started to rise in my chest. What now? No one prepares us for that. We spend decades in motion, School, work, relationships, parenting, caretaking. Our lives are structured around roles and responsibilities, around being needed, around being useful, and then one day, all of that recedes. The structure dissolves, the need lessens, and what's left is not always peace, it's a void. But what I've come to believe, after a lot of reflection and a few hard nights, is that the void is not a punishment. It's a doorway. Carl Jung didn't see that emptiness as failure or loss. He saw it as a sacred pause, an invitation to discover who we are when no one else is watching, when there's nothing left to prove, nothing to earn, nothing to fix. That sounds beautiful, and it is, but it's also terrifying. Because to meet yourself in that space, stripped of titles and tasks, means facing everything you've put off for years, all the dreams you buried, the parts of yourself you abandoned to take care of others, the pain you tucked away because there was no time to feel it. The void asks you to stop pretending you don't miss yourself. It's the part of life where things slow down enough for the soul to speak, not in shouts, not in demands, but in whispers. And if you're brave enough to listen, you begin to hear something unexpected. You're still here. You still matter. There's more of you waiting. But to find that more, you have to let go of the idea that your worth lives only in usefulness. And that's hard, because so many of us, especially those of us who have spent our lives caring for others, feel lost without someone to serve, without someone to need us. We confuse being needed with being loved. We mistake the loss of a role for the loss of identity. But identity isn't the same as presence. You're not just someone's mom or dad or spouse or colleague. You are you. And maybe, for the first time in decades, you finally have the space to find out what that really means. That's the beauty of this stage of life. It's not a repeat of the first half. It's not a continuation. It's a new chapter altogether, a rare chance to live not for expectations, but for authenticity. And authenticity isn't loud. It doesn't beg to be seen. It just is. It takes up space without apology. So now, when I feel that familiar loneliness creep in, when I start wishing someone would call or visit or remind me that I still matter, I pause, I take a deep breath, and I ask myself a different question. What part of me have I been neglecting? What truth have I been too busy to hear? Sometimes the answer is simple: a walk, a poem, music, a memory. Sometimes it's more difficult: a realization, a regret, a longing that needs my attention. But always, it's a return to the self I left behind while building a life for everyone else. Jung called this process individuation, the integration of everything we are. It's not about finding a new identity. It's about coming home, becoming whole, not perfect, just complete. So if you're standing in that empty room, unsure of who you are now that the roles have shifted, just know this: the void isn't the end. It's the beginning, and you don't have to rush to fill it. Just be there, be present, be honest, and little by little, your own voice, the one that got quiet over the years, will return, not in shouts, not to impress, but in truth, in presence, in peace. There's a moment, and maybe you've had it too, when you realize you've been waiting, not just for a phone call or a visit, but for something deeper, for someone to see you, acknowledge you, remember all that you gave. You're not even asking for praise, just to feel that your love was noticed, that your presence mattered. But the silence lingers, and in that silence, something painful begins to surface. Emotional dependence is such a subtle thing. We don't think of ourselves as needy. We've been strong our whole lives, after all. We've raised families, held jobs, kept things together when no one else could. But somewhere along the way, we began to hope, quietly, maybe even unconsciously, that those we cared for would one day return the gesture, that they'd meet our devotion with their own, that they'd make space for us the way we always made space for them. And when that doesn't happen, the emptiness cuts deep. For me, it started with small things. Disappointment when a message wasn't returned. A sinking feeling when holidays came and went without a meaningful moment. I told myself not to take it personally. They're busy. They love me. I know they do. But love doesn't always feel like love when it's stretched thin by time and distance. And without realizing it, I started tying my emotional well-being to whether or not they included me. That's when it hit me. I was living on borrowed meaning, waiting for others to validate my place, my worth. Carl Jung would say, this is the danger of projection, placing the responsibility for our happiness, our identity, onto someone else. He warned that the soul grows restless when it's forced to depend on external affirmation. And I've come to see how right he was, because no one, not even your children, can carry the weight of your unlived life. It's not fair to them, and it's not fair to you. Real love, the kind that lasts and grows and deepens, can't survive in the soil of emotional demand. It needs space, freedom, a sense that each person is whole within themselves. And that wholeness, it starts with you. I had to ask myself a hard question. What if they never show up the way I want them to? What if the acknowledgement never comes? What then? And the answer that came, quiet but firm, was this. Then I still get to live. I still get to matter, because I'm not here to be completed by anyone. I'm here to become fully myself. I don't want to be someone who waits to be chosen. I want to choose myself. To fill my days with meaning I don't have to borrow from someone else. To find beauty in moments that belong only to me. And I've started doing that. Slowly, deliberately. I've returned to old passions, tried new things. Let myself explore parts of me that got put on hold. I've remembered what it feels like to create something for no other reason than it brings me joy. That joy doesn't erase the sadness, but it balances it. It reminds me that I'm not just someone's mother or father or partner or friend. I'm someone, whole, even when alone. Jung talked about emotional maturity as the capacity to be with oneself, not in isolation but in peace. To enjoy company, yes, but not need it like oxygen. To love others without making them responsible for your joy. That's the shift. And when you make it, even if it's gradual, even if it's hard, something changes. The weight of expectation lifts. The tension in relationships eases. The neediness softens into presence. And love, real love, begins to flow again. Not from desperation, but from choice. Not from fear of being forgotten, but from the freedom of being seen as you are. So if you're in that place, waiting, hoping, aching for something that may never come, I just want you to know, you don't have to wait anymore. You can begin right now to reclaim your life, to live with enoughness, to find peace not in being needed, but in being whole. There's a part of ourselves we often keep buried, especially when we've been caretakers most of our lives. It's the part that feels too messy, too heavy, too raw to show. The part that aches when we smile through the pain, that winces when our kindness is overlooked, that wants to scream even as we nod and say, it's okay. But it's not always okay. And if I'm being honest with you, there were times I felt invisible in my own life, not because anyone was cruel, but because I had trained myself to be accommodating, to put harmony above truth, to make room for everyone else, even when I had no room left for myself. That hidden part of me, the one I didn't let anyone see, started to feel like a stranger I was afraid to meet. I called it my weakness, my shame, my failure to be endlessly patient and strong. But Jung had a different name for it, the shadow. He believed that everything we repress, the anger, the sadness, the bitterness, the fear, doesn't disappear. It waits, it festers, It finds other ways to speak, through resentment, through distance, through the quiet sorrow that creeps into our bones at night. And I think we know this, deep down. We know when something inside us is crying to be acknowledged. It might look like snapping at someone over something small, or feeling irrationally hurt by a passing comment, or waking up with that heavy lump in your chest, unsure where it came from. I remember one night, sitting alone in my kitchen, whispering to myself, "I feel so unimportant." And the moment I said it out loud, I cried, not because it was a new feeling, but because I had finally admitted it. That was the beginning of healing, because the shadow doesn't need to be fought. It needs to be seen. It needs us to say, "Yes, I feel this." And it doesn't make me bad, it makes me human. We spend so much of our lives trying to be the good version of ourselves, the calm parent, the wise elder, the grateful one. But those masks get heavy, and the longer we wear them, the further we drift from our truth. I've started letting mine slip, gently, carefully. When I feel hurt, I allow myself to say so. When I feel anger, I ask where it comes from, and listen without judgment. When I feel jealous or lonely or forgotten, I remind myself that these are not flaws, they are signals, invitations to come closer to myself. It's not about unleashing every emotion recklessly, it's about honoring what's real, about giving space to the full range of your humanity, even if no one else sees it. And here's the beautiful part. The more honest I become with myself, the more honest my relationships become too. When I say, "I feel overwhelmed," instead of pretending I'm fine, people respond with tenderness I never expected. When I admit I'm struggling today, it opens the door for deeper connection, not just surface-level checking in, but real presence. We think we have to be strong for others to respect us. But I've learned that true strength comes from owning your wholeness, not just the light, but the shadow too. And when we do that, we stop passing on the myth that love requires perfection. We stop teaching our children to hide their pain. We show them, by example, that it's okay to be complex, to be vulnerable, to be real. Jung said, "Healing comes from the acceptance of all that we are." And I've found that to be profoundly true. The anger you hide, it has something to tell you. The sadness you swallow, it's asking for compassion. The tiredness in your bones, it's not laziness, it's a sign you've carried too much for too long. So let it out, slowly, safely, honestly, not to fall apart, but to come together within yourself. Because freedom doesn't come from fixing everything. It comes from no longer needing to pretend. There's something sacred about growing older that I didn't understand when I was younger. Back then, I thought getting older was mostly about losing things. Energy, relevance, clarity, roles. But what I'm beginning to see now is that aging, if we let it, brings something deeper than all of that. It brings us back to ourselves, not the version we created to please others, not the role we played to keep the peace or the strength we showed to be needed. I mean the self underneath it all. The quiet, solid, whole self that doesn't need applause or permission to exist. Jung often said that the second half of life is where real living begins, and I think I finally understand what he meant. The first half is about becoming someone. The second half is about unbecoming everything that isn't really you. It's about shedding the pressure to explain, to justify, to constantly be enough, because you already are. There's a kind of authority that doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It's the kind that simply is. It comes from alignment, from the harmony between who you are and how you live. That's the kind of presence I want now, not to be admired, not to be needed, but to be real. You know, there was a time when I thought being loved was the ultimate goal. But now I think, more than love, I want to be respected, not because I'm perfect, not because I've done everything right, but because I've come home to myself, and I stand in that truth without flinching. Respect doesn't come from recounting your sacrifices or reminding people of your worth. It comes from embodying your value quietly and clearly every day. And when you live like that, when you stop trying to prove anything, something shifts. People feel it. They notice the steadiness in your tone, the softness in your eyes, the quiet confidence in the way you move through the world, and they respond. Maybe not all at once, maybe not in the way you imagined, but they feel your gravity, your clarity, your peace. You don't need to chase connection, you become it. You don't need to beg to be seen, you simply are. There's a moment, and it comes gently after all the inner storms, when you sit alone and realize, this is enough. This moment, this breath, this quiet, this self. And from that place, you don't need to control how others see you. You just live. You say no when it's right. You say yes when it's true. You walk away from what shrinks you. You walk toward what nourishes you. And the world, slowly, begins to meet you differently. Your children may see you with new eyes, not because you demanded their attention, but because you reclaimed your space. Your friends may hear you more clearly, not because you raised your voice, but because you started speaking from your center. And you, most of all, begin to feel like you again. Not the version who was always giving, always proving, always waiting, but the version who knows, I don't need to be anything other than exactly who I am. That's where dignity lives. That's where peace begins. And maybe, just maybe, that's where real life starts. Not in the doing, not in the proving, but in the being. So here we are, my friend, not at the end, but at the return. Back to the self. Back to what matters. Back to the truth you've carried all along. Welcome home.
If this felt meaningful to you, it might mean something to someone else too. So hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe. That's how YouTube knows to share it with others. Maybe together, we can help someone see things a little differently.